Well, Nat Geo seems to have really taken a turn for the worse here recently. They've gotten a new editor-in-chief, and it's a lady, and she's Jewish, and it's the first Jewish person or lady that's ever run the thing, and nothing against women or possibly Jews either, but one of those two sects that I just said would have an agenda to where they pit black people against white people to defray their own guilt of the Jewish slave trade that happened, but that's not really the point that I'm going with, although that's kind of the edge that's around the entire border of the facts. They've decided now that they're going to start spitting out pseudoscience rather than fact, because fact sometimes hurts people's egos. That if they were to mention the poverty in another nation, that would paint them in a bad light and that they shouldn't do that. Well, National Geographic has always brought awareness to people before because of that exact fact. So now they're not going to help bring awareness to facts because they're going to try to avoid it. Because they want to be politically correct. So this month here they have a new article out, and it's about race. And the Jewish lady decided to take this on and wanted to throw a total different twist at it. And they actually are denying science, DNA, genetics, morphology, biology, and history, and trying to just whitewash and vanilla the whole thing out as being, we're all the same, guys. Some people are just a little tanner than each other, but there's no difference between races. Well, as soon as I saw this, I started investigating, trying to grab pictures, and one that I saw was Jared Taylor. Very familiar with Jared's work, and so I clicked on it, and he just put out a video. And I think what I'm going to do is mirror that a little bit, and I think I'll do my normal thing where I'll talk over the top of it a little bit, stopping it every once in a while to make my own comments. Although he's much more eloquent than I, and this is the reason that we're doing it this way.
As you know, it's the fashion to claim that there is no such thing as race, and that all human populations are essentially the same. This view never made sense, and now recent work in DNA has thoroughly refuted it, but the myth lives on. For example, the April issue of National Geographic is devoted entirely to denying race. And right in the introduction, Editor-in-Chief Susan Goldberg explains that, and I quote, "Race is not a biological construct, but a social one that can have devastating consequences." Let's take a look through the magazine. There is the inevitable article called Skin Deep. It explains that race is, quote, "largely a made-up label used to define and separate us." Here is an interesting spread that shows different skin colors around the world, implying...
Now, hold on. I just want to interject here. So, the different races that they had come up with scientifically, Mongoloid, Asiatic, European, Hamitic, whichever way you want to start looking at these, Caucasoids, that they had done so for an easy way to describe somebody. Let's say somebody just ran up and took your purse and ran around the corner. Who took your purse? How can you describe him? Well, it was a black man about, okay, now this is really defining it. Before you'd have to say his tan level is, but no, we don't do that, because why? We've already figured out that there are a lot of different people due to the way that genetics ran a long time ago before recorded history ever came out. And easily, whenever you look at these pictures, you can tell the black people that are in these pictures, and you can tell there's some admixed people in there. There's a few Asians mixed in here, but there's no mistaking which ones are which ones, and who might be black, and who is probably white. Although they want to sneak in some pictures like this, where they just black and whited the picture and made it as pale as possible, and they try to stick it next to this to try to give you an idea, whenever she's a lot darker than that in reality in a color photograph, and then this is somebody that would be more related to her, and this wouldn't be related to that. Maybe a half-breed of that, maybe. And people like this, where they're somewhat lighter, but there's a black man, black woman wearing a Caucasian mimicking hair hat. Here's another one. Black man, black man, black man. A lot of Caucasian admix, though. But what they want you to believe is that all these are the same people. They're really just all the same people. Now, if we get everybody speaking the same language, there's no difference ever really between them. Just not true. Let's continue.
That skin color is all there is to race. The article warns us sadly that, quote, skin color still determines treatment in the 21st century. On this page, we have the famous quote from Craig Venter of the Human Genome Project. The concept of race has no genetic or scientific basis. Oddly, on the very next page are photos of a chimp and a baby side by side, with the explanation that their DNA is nearly 99% the same.
That's quite odd to show those back to back, but the first one, just to have shown that. In the picture, they're showing the different skulls and how it is easily able for an archaeologist to look upon it and go, this one's a Negroid, this one's a Mongoloid, this is a Caucasian. Because of simple things, morphology, nasal slits, things like that, the way things look, and you can tell who has a prognostic jaw, who doesn't, and so on. And so you can tell without even DNAing the people, pretty much, with like a 95% or more accuracy on who they are. Then you can take things like bone measurements of how long the femur is versus other bones, or your tibia and fibula versus your humerus, and so on, and come up with an idea of who we're talking about also, because there's different morphology in that also that they've known for hundreds and hundreds of years, but they want to discount and say that biology doesn't really exist. In fact, all of those sciences, like crayonmetry and things, that doesn't exist. That you couldn't possibly tell what race somebody was because race doesn't exist. Are you following me? Now here he shows you this, and sure enough, there's 99% the same as a chimpanzee. Black, white people, they're all about 99% the same. And so that's them stumbling right there too, because that shows you how little it takes to make a graphic difference between us all. I think we're 96% the same amount as a banana. So it's not that radical of a change to say 1% is this different. How much percentage is there difference between blacks and whites, Mongoloids and Asians, Denisovans, and so on? And people have figured this out, and it's becoming a finite science. And right in the face of that finite science, they're going, no, there's no. This Jewish lady, Goldberg, wants to put this idea out here. Strange that that would be the case. Especially whenever just a couple of months ago, they had an issue called Why Do We Lie? Let's continue.
How'd that get in there? It shows pretty dramatically that tiny genetic differences can have huge consequences. There is also an article about all the arbitrary and ridiculous things that divide human beings. Of course, it includes a picture of the wall on the Mexican border. There is a heartwarming spread called The Many Colors of Matrimony, with portraits of brides and grooms from mixed marriages.
Another thing that the Jews are trying to promote. If anybody's ever heard of the Kellergy plan, their plan is for everybody else to mingle and turn into one Goyim race, and the Israelites, the Jews, the Ashkenazi, who do not interbreed with anybody but Ashkenazi, to stay pure. And if you wonder who's pushing this ideal, it's these people whose last names quite often end in Stein and Berg. And you wonder about their culture and why they're not allowing a lot of Negroids and why they don't marry them. It's strictly forbidden. Why? And they can throw the Holy Bible at you and say that, but then they can turn around and say, in my holiness, I tell you that you should be goyim? Really? Look at this next silly bit here of stagedness.
An article called "A Place of Their Own" celebrates black colleges. Here are future scientists in a chemistry class at Clark Atlanta University. An article called "The Rising Anxiety of White America Shows Sad-Looking White People in a Bar."
Now, isn't this funny what they're picking and choosing and trying to put out? They're trying to put out this. The only thing that would trump this is the next ad is black people on vacation giggling and swimming and running through a field of daisies. Or perhaps a mixed marriage doing the same thing. But now they're trying to act like these old veterans at a VW lodge who were sitting here watching the game and going over old times and enjoying each other are somehow some depressed thing that's going on. Yeah, and they have to pick a special picture like this where it's like, look, it's not even quite Cheers. Who's to say what day this was, what time, what anything? What context is this in? And you can't get the answer on that. But the context they put it in is that white people are missing the past. How disgusting.
As you can see, the caption says, "Missing the past." The article goes on to warn that some white people, quote, "react anxiously and angrily to a sense that their way of life is under threat. But complaining about immigration is, quote, akin to shaking a fist at a rain cloud."
Shaking a fist at a rain cloud. I'm sorry I caught you at a bad moment there, Jared. Yeah, so like it's gonna rain. No, it's not necessarily gonna rain. We have the choice to do any of these things we choose. We can immigrate or not immigrate. People are putting us up to a standard that we chose for ourselves at one time that we can change, and that we currently are deciding to change. We're realizing that we're immigrating a whole lot of people that don't like our ideals and want to change our ideals to what they think they should be. And that's not what this country was founded on. It was founded on people that were here that had an ideal that everybody else wanted to be like, and everybody else started to mimic us. Now they want to come to us and try to tell us how we should act. And it's disgusting. No one should interfere. Sure, we can take input. We'll be like, yeah, I'll listen to you. What's your song sound like? But nobody says we're going to change and start playing your music. That's not the way this works. You're supposed to come to our country, learn our ways, go back to your country, and fix it. Try to take what you liked out of our country and fix yours. We're supposed to do the same to you. We visit, we check out what you got, what's going on, your culture and things. If we like it, we'll add it to our mix. What's that called? Taco? Man, I like those. Let's continue.
This issue of National Geographic is also an apology. As Susan Goldberg explains, the way the magazine used to cover race was so nasty that, in her words, it leaves you speechless.
Really?
She had to go back 102 years to find a sufficiently shocking example of this. Here is a 1916 photo of Aborigines. The caption says, "These savages rank lowest in intelligence of all human beings."
That's odd. That's odd. I'll catch it right there for you, Jer. That's odd. Okay, so they had to go back over 100 years to even find where they've said something badly. And they actually called somebody a savage. Now, back then, you didn't try to be politically correct. You just said the words that meant the words that were the verbs that were supposed to come out your mouth. Now you can't say things like that. Now you've got to dance around all kinds of things. For a while then it was okay to say primitives but not savages. Because, you know, black people are still primitives, but you can't call them savage anymore. Then of course they didn't like primitives and so on, and it goes up the scale from there as those people become more and more sentient, aware, and closer to being Nominal. Anyhow, so what you have here is her calling her own magazine a travesty, that they had done bad things in the past, and they have to go back 100 years to say, look, we said these people were savages and had the lowest IQ. Well, guess what? They are a primitive people. Primitive and savage can be found in a thesaurus, and they do have the lowest IQ on the planet, hovering at the same number that sub-Saharan Africans hover at, which is the lowest on the planet. And then, of course, at the top, and not to gloat, we have Europeans, Americans, and then Chinese, Asians. And as Americans, we don't freak out that the Chinese have a few points on us. We realize what we have up against us, that Chinese just gear straight forward, and we're having such an open society here. We're not forcing them to learn and basing their life on it and things like that, like they're doing there, to gain that extra 2% or so that they get above us on an IQ test. But it's kind of disgusting that they've gone and taken this route, and that she turns the magazine into an apology, and that they're no longer going to treat race the way that they have before. They have a whole new idea where they're going to whitewash the whole thing. I'm not sure if anybody agrees with that. Would you rather be taught the truth, or would you rather be told somebody's fainted, farcical tale, or be omitted from what shows bad things? You notice they haven't shown anything on Haiti in quite some time, and it's still the trash heap and shithole that it ever was. But they're not showing you any of that information anymore because they don't want to throw it in your face, or they don't want to seem racist because it shows black people in a poverty and a bad situation that they're creating for themselves. Well, is that reality? Why are we shunning away from reality now? I thought National Geographic was showing you things that were all around the world and things that you didn't know, making you aware of that. And sure, it was always about animals and gazelles and badass photography, but also it's about human events and things that are happening, and it makes an awareness around the planet due to the power of this magazine, or the power that it probably used to have. Watch it start plummeting. Depending on what stories come out after this, it will start to plummet, and you'll find it starting to key to a different audience. And if this is the way things are going, it's getting pretty disgusting. Let's continue.
And so it goes. Whites are miserable racists. Race is a myth. We are all the same, so we should relax and enjoy giving our country away. Well, curiously enough, the very month this issue of National Geographic appeared, so did this book. It's called Who We Are and How We Got Here. It's by a scientist named David Reich, who has spent his career studying genetic differences between populations. This book is mostly about how to use ancient DNA to understand prehistoric migrations. However, Professor Reich also attacks what he calls the orthodoxy about race, namely that all groups are identical. And I quote, "The indefensibility of the orthodoxy is obvious at almost every turn." Well, apparently not to Susan Goldberg.
No, apparently not. And she's going to deny that, craniometry, any science now that tells you what race is what race, because if it doesn't involve black people, they get jealous. What? Now, look, we're going to have to live with reality here. We can't change the way we're supposed to talk about things or discuss it because somebody gets offended. If they get offended, either go back to Africa where you don't hear the same story and do something in your homeland that you can be proud of, or go back to your homeland and do something that you can be proud of. And maybe somebody will pay attention to that instead of the lack of decent history that's gone on since primordial time. Let's continue.
He goes on to write, "We should prepare for the likelihood that in the coming years, genetic studies will show that behavioral or cognitive traits are influenced by genetic variation, and that these traits will differ on average across human populations. Got that? There are important differences between groups. And whether you want to call them races or not, it's not just skin color.
So they're going to be able to pick out genes and things that are going to show up in certain people, and they'll be like, these are some of the traits and things that have helped to make these people more successful than these people. Now, when that happens, oh, that's racist science. No, it's not. Wouldn't you want to know what made people more advanced than other people? What got us to where we are? What made the white people that made all the things and airplanes and shoot into space? What helps drive that mechanism? When we all like to have that mechanism? Well, we're not going to muddy our race to help you have that mechanism. You have to come to the reality of learning, adapting, and catching into that mechanism. It would be a travesty of the humanity of the earth for all the races to try to deny themselves and marry into other races to muddy down their own race just to try to acquire something. It's almost like modern day cannibalism, where the black people used to eat the white people to see if they could get the white man's knowledge. Now we're just going to breed with them, and I'm going to say stupid, but maybe my kids might get smarter because of it. Maybe if we were better parents and we applied ourselves to our kids correctly, it wouldn't take but a few generations and they could get caught quite up a bit. What holds many generations behind nowadays is that they're brought up in a stagnant atmosphere of racism that allows them to, as they grow up and start to learn about history, to start hating whitey and believing in some farcical tale again that whites didn't do none of this. They just whitewashed it all, and black people were somehow involved. And surely the West African people that are not associated with any of these cultures, genetically or culturally, somehow were those people, because it's those people that have an identity crisis. It's those people that are going around saying false things. Let's continue.
There is already plenty of evidence for gene-based racial differences in average intelligence and many other traits. Professor Reich is issuing a warning. We're going to find the genes for these things, and the race deniers are going to look very foolish. So hooray for David Reich. Well, maybe not. After writing all this sensible stuff, he then jumps the tracks. He writes that if you think the racial differences that science will reveal correspond to current stereotypes, you are, quote, essentially guaranteed to be wrong. He adds, quote, we have no idea right now what the nature or direction of genetically encoded differences among populations will be. We have no idea? I have a very good idea. We're going to find that stereotypes are correct. Jews are smart. Blacks have low impulse control. Japanese are law-abiding. West Africans are good sprinters. How can Professor Reich possibly say we have no idea? I guess he figures he can go only so far against the grain. So it's 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. But we're headed in the right direction.
At least that's what they want you to believe. But why can't we take a giant step? Why can't we take a giant leap for mankind? Why can't we go ahead and take our humanity to the next level? Is it because there are fish hooks being thrown into us, pulling us and holding us down from being able to reach the next level? And who's controlling the other end of these fish hooks? Who's throwing them? What's happening? And why? Why would somebody possibly think this was the answer to do anything like that? Rather than to go there and educate the people and let them keep their own primordial lands, to let them scatter into your lands and ruin your own heritage that goes back from primordial time. Letting them totally disrespect their own heritage and try to grasp out at some other culture and see if they can get into that like a leech rather than fixing their own culture in the first place. Whoever thought that was a great idea? Really? It was them again?